Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 5 members, 5 questions, and 5 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member and run from the daffy to the deep. We're going to do something different a little tonight. We've got some ideas for changing up the show a bit. We're going to try them out over the next couple of weeks. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try and leave our microphones open as long as it doesn't get too disturbing and be a little bit more interactive as we can without dragging the show on forever. So let's find out who's with us today. What's the roll call?
Hi, Steph Murder, doctoral candidate at Kent State University, practicing clinical counselor and co-host of Grad School Deconstructed.
Hi, Eric Perry. I am a clinical faculty at Southern New Hampshire University.
Hi, everyone. Elliott Ingersoll. I'm a professor of counseling at Cleveland State University and host of Applied Topically.
Hey, everyone. Gina Martin. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater and co-host of Supervision Time.
Steph, you've got the first question.
When did you start feeling welcome by the profession? Feeling you belonged, at least a little?
And it goes to me first. I would say it was my first national conference. I did not get wonderful mentoring at my alma mater. I'm talking to you, University of South Carolina. And I showed up at a national conference, an ACA national conference, and would run into faculty there. And they would go, "What are you doing here?" I mean, that was the intonation with it. However, I wound up giving a presentation on chaos theory and counseling. And I don't know, it was like putting peanut butter and chocolate or chocolate and peanut butter. It seemed to be a mix that everybody loved because the room filled up. I counted the seats when I got into the room. That's how anxious I was. And there was 180 seats in the room and it filled. And I ran out of my 180 handouts. So I got the idea that the room was pretty full. And that's when I felt like what I had to say was important and did well with it. I had been doing presentations for years in employees assistance program to tough audiences. So it was, in a sense, no different than that for me. But that's when I felt like outside of the connections I had with my faculty, which were not really strong, I felt like I could fit in here.
I think my experience was more, I don't want to say more, but I will say that academically, I felt good. Coming in emotionally, I think was different. I struggled with imposter syndrome for a little while. And, it still hits me every now and then, right? I have those second guess moments. But I started to feel more connected. Really, the first couple of times I started to teach and co-teach with faculty at Southern New Hampshire University, where I am now. I don't know. There was a connection there. And I felt like there were faculty that were at the same place developmentally, and we just connected really quickly. And I just remember thinking, like, this feels good, and I started to bring things up in meetings and starting working on projects, and like things started to snowball where I felt like, okay, I feel settled in this. And I feel like, I don't know, part of the crew, right? That was really important for me. I wanted to feel like I was in it with the rest of my faculty.
Culture of faculty changes wherever you go. And so I was thinking, well, what weren't you getting at the other place that you were getting here?
Well, I was kind of an island at my previous institution. So I was brought in as an administrator, having some leadership experience in other fields. I was brought in to help with their online program and get that started. So I was kind of separate and apart from the faculty in a way. At least they didn't view me as the same because I had this administrative responsibility. So I think actually walking back into a clinical role, into a primarily teaching role in a cohort of faculty that were in a similar place developmentally, I think was helpful, at least for the most part, right? We have some really senior faculty and some newer faculty, but dropping in that environment, I think, was different than walking into an institution with administrative responsibilities that kind of set me apart from the group. So, and I felt like going in, I didn't need that camaraderie. I didn't need that, I tried to like build myself up to it and realized pretty quickly that I wanted that connection and I wanted that ability to collaborate with my peers and feel like I was part of the group. And that really helped.
I think for me, I've mentioned this person before, working with Judy Moranti in a cervic. That was really a wonderful experience. She's a wonderful person, wonderful mentor. And I think that was where I felt a good niche, a good sense of belonging for the first time.
Oh, and you made me think, if we're going to name drop, right? I'm going to name drop ACEs and Marty in particular, right? Because I think Marty and I got to connect, pretty early on in my service to ACEs. And I think just having people with like-minded interests too, to talk to and talk through things. And, at the time, the whole tech and counseling thing wasn't a really big, it wasn't a popular notion, that's for sure. So being able to have those conversations and people with similar interests and not having a huge group, because nobody in my cohort had the same interest through doctoral training, I think was really important.
I kind of have two for this one. The first one is when I felt connected as a counselor, actually doing clinical work. And this predates back to my master's program. And I remember having lots and lots of imposter syndrome, like you were talking about, Eric, and feeling like, oh my goodness, I don't even know what to say to people. I don't know how to sit in this chair. I barely have my own life figured out. How do people expect me to help them with theirs? And just feeling kind of discombobulated. And it wasn't until I had a client tell me that somehow, and I still to this day don't really know how, I showed this person that they were worth it. And they told me that. And I remember feeling such a connection to that kind of work at that moment. And again, this was all trauma. These were all children. And it was a rough area, particular niche to be in, but it worked out. And I found a lot of fulfillment and joy in that. And that was probably the first time that I felt connected to the profession of counseling. And then when I taught my first class, my first master's class with Steph Stanifer, for name dropping, I was co-teaching and I was pregnant. I was eating popsicles throughout the entire thing and beyond miserable. And at the end of that, I was like, I know that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I just had this overwhelming sense of peace and fulfillment and feeling like completely connected with being a counselor educator. And I didn't even know what all that would entail until, a few years later. I was still in my doc program. And I feel like that sense of belonging and that sense of connection is just deepened every year that I remain in the profession and continue to build new connections and that kind of thing.
I get all the warm fuzzies, I think, listening to these stories, and that makes me happy. I'm still figuring it out, I think. I've definitely been accepted by individuals. But I think when I'm thinking about the profession, I'm still a student. I'm an advanced student, I suppose, but I'm still there. And so I think sometimes there's a little bit of, you have that, and that's understandable. And there should be boundaries there, I suppose. But as far as coming in, I don't know. I guess it's kind of like I feel very much more and more, I think is what I'm trying to say. More and more, the more I'm there, the more I'm participating, the more I can grow, then the more confident I become. And I think that part is a little bit of projection from me when I'm not necessarily feeling it from the profession. Perhaps it's just, going back to imposter syndrome and not being sure. So things sometimes sound really good in your head, and then you're doing them out there and you just kind of hear the words. And you lose where you were going. You're like, was this a good idea? Does this make sense at all? But then you get good feedback and it helps to, keep you going and making you think that like there is a home here and, there's something to still grow into as well. And I look forward to that.
If it's helpful, I feel better hearing that folks have this, that imposter syndrome is a more common thing. Like there's nothing that scares me more than like this huge ego that walks in the room and has never questioned their path, and I've met folks like that, unfortunately. But I think it feels like a journey. And I like the way you described it. Like there's this, it changes. I feel good. I question it. I like that.
I was going to say something counter to that, actually. I mean, I've heard imposter syndrome at least 3 times on this show already. And I heard it a lot in my classes with students. And it seems like it's a socially constructed negative label that because we're not there yet, we figure we're imposters. And for me, it's like, what is there yet? I mean, when will you know that you're not an imposter? And maybe it's those people who make that assumption that walk in the room that Eric's met. But, unless I think it's natural developmental questioning of self and not necessarily a syndrome of being an imposter, but call it what you will.
I just want to chime in real quick, Marty, that imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm back in a cycle of studying Eastern cosmology where the one becomes the many and we're all the many who then become the one. And in that sense, we're all imposters. And that feeling like Joyce, I'm studying James Joyce's work and how he linked it to different mythological systems. And it was always that sense of unease because we're really not who we think we are. And it's just this whole kind of like, it's like one of those shows where someone has a secret identity that even they don't know about, Total Recall, Jason Bourne, something like that, but from a cosmological perspective.
Sorry, just what I think of with that most often is the mirror gate in Neverending Story, where you have to face yourself and it terrifies people.
Okay, I've got the next question, which is, it's conference season. What was the worst display of a conference presenter or presentation behavior that you've witnessed?
Oh, I was excited for this one. So I have a pet peeve, right? So I'm going to put that out there first. The posters that hang with nobody there. Like, I get it. Stuff happens, scheduling issue, whatever. But then the orphan posters, right? I like that. I'm going to use that from here on out. So then I see something really interesting and there's nobody to talk to about it. I also understand how awkward it is to stand there and wait for people to walk around and present to you or present to them as they walk through. But I just don't like it because I will find things and it's the one I'm interested in that nobody's standing next to. But actually, I had an experience just sitting in a presentation with somebody critiquing a theory. And it was a pretty well-known theory of supervision. And the theorist was in the audience, unbeknownst to the presenter. And the critique was harsh. I mean, very harsh. And to this theorist's credit, they sat there, watched, just waited for the room to clear out. And I was curious. So I stuck around and kind of watched the aftermath. and I really kind of enjoyed it.
That happened to me at an ACES conference. I was speaking about a supervision model, and the one of the authors of the supervision model was in the audience. And my suggestions were additive, not detractive from the theory. And she and I became very cordial friends, I would say, professionally. And after the session, she said, well, the other author actually wrote that section. So she was in a sense dismissing herself from that part too.
Well, and to be fair, this was a Rotten Tomatoes review, Marty. This was a critique as I have not seen of the particular theory. Like, there wasn't anything there for me to say, okay, what are we doing with this other than saying it's awful, So, I mean, the whole time I just felt my shoulders were in my ears, just cringing with, because this presenter was a student and clearly had no idea the theorist was in the audience. But the poise with which this person responded, I feel like just watching that made me a better person, right? Because I don't know that I would have been able to do that. So it was pretty scary. So I think we need to take a little bit of care when we present about what we use now. We use it. So that's one that stuck with me for a while.
I just got these right before the show started, and I got to own this one. The first one has got to be a presentation I did with another person. We were graduate students, and we had it very well planned out. And we had parts we were going to do. We were going to back and forth it, and then we had activity. We'd practiced it, and then we go in, and my co-presenter's like going off on weird, intuitive, emotional tangents, and getting into like the feelings of the people in the seats. And I'm like, I've seen this before. I'm trying to remember. I played in a lot of bands, and I'm like, that son of a bitch took MDMA before he did this presentation. And yes, sure enough, he was on MDMA. I'm like, dude, you could have told me, and I would have followed the affective lead a little better, but they loved it though, and it was just so awkward for me because I was like, and then I'm thinking, well, geez, I'm the only sober guy in the room here. I don't know what's going on, but it was interesting, but not what I would hope for in a professional presentation.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. I don't know. I don't have like a solid one. I think the only one is when I received an award recently, being called up by the wrong name. I think that's my only one. That's all I can say.
Are we going to work that into your stage name at least?
We should.
Are we just going to leave it unsaid? That's fair too.
We should work it into the stage name at one point. Yes.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Gina, in that there's not like something that really sticks out. And so I do think though, there were times I think in the beginning, master's student, going to your first conferences and just attending those presentations and watching sometimes that dialogue and the way they come at you at times. And it was it took me back a little bit, and it was just like, oh, all right, gloves are off. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I learned that really isn't the way that to compose yourself at a presentation. It's just what some people do.
Come on, Steph, this is low hanging fruit.
I was leaving it for you.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to take your answer.
Steph and I sat at a presentation where the person had white background slides with nothing else and very small print with lots of it, lots and lots of print, as they were no pictures, no designs, nothing, as they were describing every nuance of their dissertation. And I checked out after about 20 minutes, and I had my tablet there, and I was sitting right next to Steph, but I couldn't lean over and start cracking jokes. So instead, I started texting her, knowing that she'd be looking at her phone because she was wanting to get out of there too. And the person has too many words on slides and is going to read all of them. She's not come up for air in 35 minutes. So at the 35-minute point, then I start texting. And she didn't. She just talked straight. Didn't take any questions, didn't stop, didn't engage. And Steph's response was, I know my brain is melting. And the other trick that I've taught students is, if you're in a large presentation, and I was at a luncheon where the next luncheon speaker was from a professional association, and they were going to come up and tell us all the wonderful things they do for us. You take your cell phone, you turn it over, you look at it, you swipe your finger on it, you hold it up to your ear, you put your hand in the other ear, and you pretend like you're having a conversation. You stand up simultaneously with both hands, and you walk to the back of the room and out the door. People are thinking he must have got an emergency phone call. So you're not walking out on the speaker, you're walking out on a fake telephone call. And so Steph responded, you can always take an emergency phone call. And then, is that what you're going to do? And I said, I think bleeding from my eyes would express my point better. And she said, I almost actually laughed, had to control it. I referred to myself as stigmatogensius. Then Steph took my picture from the website and put blood tears coming down my eyes and sent it back to me.
Oh, I love that.
So the worst display of a conference presenter or presentation behavior is to not come up for air, not engage your audience in any way, and just throw your data at them. And that should be enough.
I got to say, Marty, you reminded me briefly of a presentation at university. It was about these new systems we were going to use. Small font, huge room, 400 people. You couldn't see it. Person would not hold the mic up. And she kept saying, I don't need it. And I finally stood up and I said, I'm sorry, I'm 50% deaf. You need the microphone. And then she kept holding it like on her kind of solar plexus. I'm like, you got to put it on your chin all through the thing. And other people are like, I can hear fine and I can't hear this person. It was just so crazy. And I'm like, why did they? This was like a consultant. So it was like, I am not charging enough for what I do, or they had just made a bad hire that time. I don't know. I got to get caught up in the chat here. Gee.
So my question is, what activity, hobby, or skill would win you a gold medal if it were an Olympic sport?
I think it's kind of a combination of a lack of skills and a lot of hobbies, but floating from one thing to the next, 20 minutes of James Joyce, an hour of bass playing, a half an hour of research studies, an hour of emails, back to the bass. Where's my guitar? Just kind of an ADHD thing. But I'm so attuned to it now. I'm just like, we were laughing as my wife's birthday was today, and we were clearing some space. And I have eyeglasses and highlighters and pens in like 4 places all around the house. Because that's, if I'm cooking, I'm also reading. And so that's where I float. And I have all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what you would call that. It's sort of an ADHD Benihana. But if that were the Olympic event, I think I'd take gold.
For me, it is killing flies. So I am abnormally good at killing flies on the very first swat. And I won't use a fly swatter. I'll use my hand or like a piece of paper if I have one. And in the building that I work in, it's an old building and we have a lot of flies. So they'll like buzz on my window. And if I'm sitting in meetings with students, I can't take the incessant buzzing on one side of my head. So I stand on my desk and I kill them, and I get them on the first time, every single time. So I would be a gold medalist fly swatter.
Do you train by waxing on, waxing off, and, all of that stuff at the roundhouse?
He doesn't deal with chopsticks.
No,
I know. But still, first try, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's impressive. Thank you. I think the reason that I got good at this very hidden skill is because in my old house in Iowa in the spring one time, I think we had a fly nest in one of our windows. And so we had like 80 flies come into our house. And I was just like walking around, killing them left and right. And I killed all of them in one day. And my family and my husband, no one could believe that I had taken my bare hands and just started swatting them. And so it's a skill that has stuck. It's come in handy.
Carpal pedal fly exterminator.
I can just see you going to people's homes and being like, bam, 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 bam. Can't see me, but I'm making hand motions to also mimic swatting flies. I would like to play Boggle for a gold medal. I don't know. I've only had the competition I've had in my life, and but the thing is that people won't play with me anymore. People refuse. My family refuses to play Boggle with me. It's no fun for them, they say. And I'm not, I don't mean to. It's like they get the different sizes and but it's the same technique. Even though I'll tell you, they make one now that's like 10 by 10. It's wild. It's huge, but it takes some getting used to, but it's really fun. But it didn't work for them. They thought they had me. But it's because they leave out all the plurals and all of the other kinds of things with all of the endings. And suffix. That's what it is. A suffix. Anyway, Boggle.
Is that the game where you press a little bubble and the dice pop around, or am I thinking of something different?
That's Trouble.
It's Trouble, yeah.
Oh, Boggle's the word game.
All
You
right.
can get in trouble playing Boggle, but that's
You can
life.
get Boggle. You can get Boggle.
I
They don't have a
great
monopoly on
Boggle. I actually have a very competitive Boggle story.
I want to hear it.
You want to hear? Okay, I'll share my Boggle story. All right. I don't know. I was like 22 or something. I was living in Rhode Island, and some guy I was talking to was having a party. And he was like, why don't you come up early and you can help me set up for the party? Okay. So I go over there early and I walk in, and some girl is rubbing Vapor Rub all over him when I walk in. I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. And then he's like, why don't the two of you go shopping together? And it turns out like it was his girlfriend that he had for however long. So I'm just like, all right. Cause she was supposed to go back and leave like the day before, but something happened, I guess. I don't know why he didn't call me to say, don't come up early, but whatever. So she didn't like me, obviously, and I didn't know what to do. But we went to the store and we had all our fake nice conversation and came back, and she's staring daggers at me. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just still in shock. That's why I didn't leave right then, because then my friends were coming in like another hour and I was going to seek solace with them. But there was Boggle over there. There was a Boggle thing on the shelf, and she's looking at me and I'm looking, and she's like, what should we do? I'm like, you know, and then I kind of am like, maybe we could play a game. I see Boggle, you know, do you play much? No, I'm like, yeah, me either, but we should play. And it was the closest Boggle match I ever had in my entire life. I thought I was going to be humiliated, both, you know, by the guy and by losing at Boggle, but I pulled it out in the end, and I just felt so satisfied because she could keep the guy. I won Boggle. It was all good.
That's a great story. Being a woman must be brutal.
Don't know any different.
You know, guys, we just smack each other in the head and get it over with, and it's like whoosh.
I just am trying to figure out what the erotic power of Vicks Vapor Rub is and what that was all about. I thought that was going to go completely in a different direction.
I think we
it was
call
just
that
to highlight the fact that I walked into blindsided.
Yeah, I would have to say, I don't know how to describe this talent. I think I developed it when I was working as a counselor for years, but I have the ability to hear what someone says and then 30 minutes later pull it into a conversation. So, you know, I can make these what would be long temporal connections. Now, how that's turned into a talent really is that I can use it as a joke. So somebody will say something 30 or 40 minutes earlier, and then conversation will go round and round and round. And then they'll say something else, and I'll tie it to what they said 40 minutes ago. So witticisms doesn't seem to capture it, but I'm not exactly sure what kind of form that is. But first of all, I'm surprised my memory lasts 40 minutes. And then secondly, I'm able to immediately, like in my head, make a connection and put out a little, I don't know, it's not a dig. They're not always bad. But,
comic meta narrative.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. Let's not use that as a show title, though.
I like the humor thing. I once got an award from my students for having the driest humor of anyone they never met. So that felt good. I feel like I could leverage that if there were some kind of competition for it. Yeah, I had a situation over the weekend. My son is playing fall ball. And in fall ball, you don't play with the same families that you normally play with during the season. Like the teams get all mixed up and there's all kinds of new people. And normally that's pretty exciting. It just so happened that the parents that were there were a little overzealous. It's early in the morning. I'm only a cup of coffee deep into the day. Like I needed some time. And my wife is watching me exit each conversation really quickly. And her comment was, if leaving a conversation was an Olympic sport, you'd win. And I feel like that's a talent, right? If I don't want to talk to you, I can pretty easily get out of the conversation. I'm not saying I ended them all well. That might be a different category, but I did end them pretty easily. So we were just laughing about it. So yeah, I guess that's my skill, killing conversation.
You could turn that into a construct that'd be interesting to study. Like, I'll bet people who can do that have a far higher inner rating of happiness. Just a speculation.
I like it. I'm gonna borrow that. Right. That's my boundary. That's my self-care, Elliott.
Yeah. I think it's up to me, eh? Do you think our scholarship is moving forward and discovering anything, or is it hostage to fads?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm using the classic answer of getting away from.
No. You cannot replace Jen here.
I know. It's okay. Martin, Jen, Sinclair, call me whatever you want. And I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, I don't know. I think we think we're discovering new things. We're making new connections. And part of me thinks that everything repeats itself. And so it's just the same cycle that we're on. And I don't know if that's sad or if that's enlightening. I don't know how I feel about it, but that's where I'm at.
Well, James Joyce believed that was humanity is just one wave of humans upon another wave of humans, but you never meet anyone new. You never have anything different in the sense it's all happening at once. A bit digression there, but I hear what you're saying.
And I agree. I was an English major in college, so I've read a fair share of Joyce, and I feel like, I don't know. And again, I oscillate between feeling like, yes, everything is new and this is all great and making all these new connections and rah, and there's no point to anything because everything is always going to be the same. That might sound a little morbid and sad, but
well, it sounds profound to me.
We can quote Martin for that. Yes.
But there's also some truth in it too. So I think that there's new packaging that's often put on ideas that maybe have been around for hundreds or thousands of years sometimes. And it can be stylized as something else, and it can be a fad, but I don't necessarily think that fads are all useless. I think it's kind of, it can be kind of a testing ground too, to explore something at times. And you can figure out what has meaning and what has value, what has purpose and what is just trash. And, for instance, I feel like there's been a big mindfulness wave, in the past 20 years. And 20 years ago, it might have felt like a fad for a bit, hearing the buzzwords and everything else. But it's really proven to have some merit. And so I think it's just something about what people are picking up on as fads, but sometimes fads lead to useful tools, even if it's just in shiny new packaging.
Yeah, that's where I put we're hostage to fads. And, I thought every 20 years they change the outside box on a cereal box, but the cereal is basically the same. And so it's not like the cereal didn't taste good 20 years ago. It was of value. It's just packaged differently nowadays. And everybody goes, oh, it's great. It's wonderful. Well, it was great and wonderful 20 years ago. And, now it just happens to be the flavor of the month and probably the theme for most conferences for the next couple of years.
I don't know. I'm stuck on this idea of something new and novel is rare, like so exceedingly rare. And I'm having trouble finding the words to really give it meaning. But I mean, it's not something that comes along very often. And I think about like those huge discoveries that we've had, like, the invention of vaccines. I've been in elementary school and talked about, had a presentation on peanut butter and when peanut butter was invented, and because I love peanut butter. It's like these novel things don't come around that often. And I think even when they do, novel doesn't necessarily mean useful or helpful or it can, like Steph mentioned, right? It can certainly be something like that. But I think we're sometimes distracted by this idea that something new is also helpful. Doesn't necessarily mean it is. And I think there's a lot to be leveraged from revisiting and relooking at things that have been around and that have been considered standards and staples I teach assessment a lot, assessment and research. And I think a lot about these tools that we keep using that I see in doctors' offices, that I see in clinicians' offices that haven't been studied in 15, 20 years, and how much language changes, how much the cultural meaning changes. How really valid are these results? How have you tested these against and looked at cultural groups and norms and, representative data samples? Like we just continue to use these things as if they're standards, but we don't continue to revisit and research the way we should. So, even these things that we consider to have utility, we need to continue to examine, because as people we change, as cultures we change. Now, maybe we shift back to where we were 30 years ago, but at the same time, we need to really understand and examine what those changes mean for the tools and things we use. So I think there is this hostage to fads idea, and I think sometimes it's more or less useful. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to examine those things that we've always found to be helpful or found to have meaning, and ensure that they continue to do so.
Wow. Thank you, group. These are great answers. And I was feeling, I think I was in a really bitchy mood when I wrote that question, because I don't do much reviewing anymore because there's so much like wrong. And like a journal article, and some of this is just the developmental trajectory of being old. And, you remember stuff and you're like, well, your lit review only goes back 15 years. This literature goes back 20 years, 25 years, and you write that so many times, and you're like, what are people doing? And then I feel like, they're just chasing down something that is like going to likely to get published because it's a fad. But you're right, Eric. Novelty, that's by virtue of the name, very rare. And what the hell? I mean, we got to do something. And back to Gina's point, I think we just do the same thing over and over. So maybe that's okay. And bouncing between fads, and maybe that's how we get breakthroughs. It's just like, you play enough scales and then all of a sudden you pop into Dorian mode and you're soloing, and whoa, maybe it happens like that. But yeah, thank you. This was because I was going to erase it. And then I'm like, no, I want to hear what people say. Cause I was feeling put out that day.
I was a fan of the question. I liked it.
I agree. And I kind of am with you, Elliott. Like, I feel like a lot of times I feel kind of like down about it, or I feel like it sounds down and, depressing. But at the same time, I feel like it's okay. I mean, I think it's a good thing. And I also love Russian literature for the same reason. Like, it's all kind of like pain and suffering and horribleness, but it's a good thing. And that doesn't sound right when it comes out like that. But the meaning behind it, I think it adds gravity.
Ineffability of some of these things is just so powerful. And, the best language can do is bark at it. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So keeping in the same vein a little bit, what is your why? Why do you continue to teach and research? Especially given the context, if we're all doing the same thing over and over again, we're on the hamster wheel of life. What's your why?
Why not?
Mic drop.
I think for me, I don't know how to not. I don't know how to stay stagnant, I suppose. I want to keep going. There's always something interesting. And if I can find a way to explore it, if I can find a way to challenge myself, that's what I want to keep doing. It's a place to grow, and it's a place to, where it makes sense to me also. So it's a really good place that I can settle in. So why leave something that's going well for you, I suppose?
For me, it's teaching. I love to see the smiles on students' faces, the joy of being mesmerized by the words that I'm sharing. No, I'm being a little snarky there. I do.
You have a different K-Crep accreditation than we do.
I thought about this question, and I'm teaching group now. And with group, there's a lot of process observation that I do. And I think I'm pretty good at that. It's looking at systems and pointing out what is not working in the system and what is working in the system too, when it happens. So having to do that for half of my time teaching, essentially, as I'm observing groups, I enjoy being in that place. And what happens is I trance off and come up with a symbol for what's going on. And then that becomes the theme of whatever that group was that I observed. And I tie it back to what I've done. But I always try to give them the symbol because that's what they'll carry with them for the next group, of what they're going to do next or what they need to not do or what they need to do more of. So for me, it's the excitement of having those in the moment connections with with this symbol that's kind of come my way from watching this group process.
Okay, this is going to be a little dark, especially for me. I don't believe in altruism as a thing, right? I don't think that actually exists. I think we do things because things feel good, even if that means doing good things, right? And we do those good things because we get some kind of intrinsic reward out of that. So I don't believe in altruism. So I'll start with that. I think I continue to do this because it feels good and I enjoy it, right? If I don't, I'm going to do something else. It's really that simple for me. I go in, I enjoy teaching, I get something out of it. I'm not saying it's all sunshine and rainbows, because there's always those moments that there's a sense of drudgery. And you find in the career research, they love that term. But at the same time, I get enough out of it. There's this balance to it that I'm motivated to continue. So it sounds on the surface, I think, like a really simple response, but that's how I've learned through trial and error to view my career and my career path, is that if I'm getting that out of it, I will be motivated to do it more and do it better. And that's what keeps me engaged.
I can resonate with both Marty and Eric in the sense that, I kind of do what I do. I always read a lot of books and looked in a lot of areas, and then when I was teaching, I really enjoyed that. But I also feel like that keeps me on my toes because I've got to be up to date and I've got to, change up the lecture every semester and that. But I like doing that. Yeah. And I kind of agree. I've thought a lot about these things, Eric. I haven't come down on a side, but I'm like, when I'm pushed to come up with evidence for altruism, I'm like, nah, I'm struggling. But if it feels good. I think Sam Harris has a very similar view when he looks at the illusion of free will. Anyway, wow, tangent. Anyway, what
pay is good.
Sorry.
Sometimes the hours suck, but
or that, yeah. But when my wife and I were joking about all these pens and glasses, and but I was like, retirement's going to be really easy for me because it's just not going to be any different. I'm going to still do things like Eric said that feel good for whatever reason, and I think it took me about 40 years to sort through that, and I really like that idea because I can't say I do anything different. That certainly sounds like what I do.
I agree with a lot of what each of you have said, and a lot of that resonates. And I want to talk about a specific shift in my career that I noticed this happen. And I don't think it's dark, Eric. I think that it makes a lot of sense that we continue to do what we like to do. And I think that there's no wrong in that. And I probably shouldn't say this on air, but I'm going to anyway.
It's Martin Sinclair. This is not Gina speaking.
Right. Remember, this is Martin Sinclair tonight. So blame them. So we get our reviews, our evaluations at the end of every semester. And I usually like to elicit feedback midpoint in the semester too. And I like to listen to those. And then I found that when I was listening to those, I was trying to be everything for everyone else, and it didn't make anyone happy. And I became a slave to trying to, make students happy and make this fun and make this engaging and whatever. And I found by doing that, I actually made it less engaging and fun because I wasn't being myself. And so I found over time that I don't want to even look at those. I don't want to read those. I don't want to even consider those. Because if I'm going to be an authentic and connected teacher in that moment, I need to be doing it for me. And I need to be doing it to connect to the people in the room with me. And I don't think that that's the wrong way to approach it, because even if you're not doing it for the other person, you have to be happy doing what you're doing in order for it to be effective. And I found over the years since that shift happened, and I look at the evaluations and I read them, and they have only gone up, because if you're authentic, people see that and people see your passion and they connect with that. And so, yeah, that's my why.
Well, I guess that's it for tonight, except for a final shot question. Let's go with my final shot question is something it seems everyone else will eat, but you won't.
Blue cheese. Don't be gross. It's nasty. I don't care what anybody says.
I missed that. What is gross?
Blue cheese.
Oh, okay. I told the story about the blue cheese with the mold. Anyway, I don't know what I wouldn't eat that everyone else seems to like, but in my family, tongue.
For me, it's all cheese. Totally creeps me out. I'm convinced it's extraterrestrial intelligence. It's a consistency thing. Horrible.
Oh my gosh. I love cheese. Love it, but not blue cheese. For me, it's cilantro. Everyone loves cilantro, and I think it tastes like mold. And
it's soapy.
One.
Yeah, you have the
soapy
genetic
mold.
thing.
Yeah, soapy mold.
Oh.
But no one else around me has that. Everybody always cooks with cilantro. And when I'm like, there's cilantro, everyone's like, what? You don't like
What
cilantro?
is the genetic thing?
It makes it taste like soap for some people. And Gina, you reminded me of my actual answer. Like, that's so much better now. Anything that has red food coloring on it.
Ew.
Like the red M&Ms, I won't eat them because they taste bitter.
I was raised on that shit, man. That is mother's milk to me.
My answer to this question is sushi. And again, coming back from a conference, you get around people and they go, well, there's this really good sushi place over there. And I'm like, not going to happen. Just cannot do sushi. Thanks to the squad, Elliott, Gina, Eric, and Stephanie. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.